I want you to imagine, just for a second, a society that looks at the bizarre, the extreme, and the genuinely dangerous, and instead of, backing away, they approach it with this methodical, almost bureaucratic obsession.
Right, yeah.
Like, you don't just do something crazy in this society, you measure it, you get it certified with outside adjudicators, you build a literal monument to it.
It's a really striking contradiction when you look at the raw data.
Yeah.
We're basically talking about the wild, untamed human impulse to rebel, but it's just crashing headfirst into this desperate desire for strict institutional validation.
Exactly. And that is the mission for today's deep dive. We are unpacking a massive stack of source material specifically, two incredibly detailed academic and sociological reports that analyze Australian Guinness World Records.
And the anti-records, too.
Oh, yeah. Perhaps even more terrifyingly, they're uncertified anti-records. We're looking at extreme physiological endurance, massive spatial engineering, and some genuinely horrifying toxicological anomalies.
A lot to cover.
It is, but our goal is to figure out what these extremes actually tell us about the Australian psyche. So, okay, let's unpack this. Because going through these records, they don't read like a trivia book.
No, not at all.
They read like a psychological profile of an entire nation.
And that framing is really essential for understanding the material. Because the overarching thesis of these reports is that, well, you just cannot separate human behavior from the geographical environment.
Right.
Australia's historical isolation from the rest of the Western world, its notoriously brutal and unforgiving climate, and this deep cultural ethos of Larrikinism.
I want to pause on that word, actually, Larrikinism.
Oh, sure.
Because I've heard it thrown around as just meaning like a lovable rogue, but in the context of these reports, it seems much heavier. It feels almost like a survival mechanism.
It functions entirely as a survival mechanism in this context, yeah. Sociologically, a larrikin isn't just someone pulling a prank.
Right, it's deeper.
Exactly. It's a cultural archetype of someone who masks deep hardship with irreverence. When your early colonial society is built on penal transportation, and you are dropped onto a continent where, the soil is barren, the droughts last for years, and the fauna is deadly.
Earnestness doesn't exactly help you survive.
Right. Irony does. Pushing back against authority, whether that authority is the British Crown or the literal laws of physics, becomes a point of intense cultural pride. And that coalesces into a society fundamentally obsessed with pushing the absolute limits of scale and endurance.
Which brings me to a question for you listening right now. As we go through these extremes today, ask yourself, what does your own environment push you to do? When you look at this Australian landscape, you have to ask yourself what you would build.
Because to understand the people in these records, we first have to understand the land they're standing on.
It's massive.
It is massively isolating, overwhelmingly vast, and largely hostile to traditional European agricultural methods. And this geographic reality prompted what the reports call an architectural and agricultural hypercompensation.
Hypercompensation feels like the understatement of the century when you look at the dingo-proof fence.
Oh, the scale is incredible.
I was reading the structural details on this and my jaw just hit the floor. We're talking about a continuous, unbroken barrier that is over 5,600 kilometers long.
It's massive.
Just for context, that is significantly longer than the main continuous stretch of the Great Wall of China. And it was completed way back in 1885.
And the design itself is fascinating.
Yeah, it's 1.8 meters high. And I really didn't understand the engineering logic here at first. It goes 30 centimeters deep into the earth. Why are you digging a trench for a fence that spans thousands of kilometers? I mean, a dingo is a wild dog, not a mole.
Well, the subterranean depth is actually the most critical engineering feature of the entire structure.
Really?
Yeah. Well, a dingo doesn't tunnel like a mole. They are highly intelligent, opportunistic diggers. If they find a soft patch of sand or an area where water erosion has created a slight gap under the wire, they'll excavate it within minutes.
Oh, wow.
So the early farmers learned very quickly that a surface-level fence in an environment prone to flash floods and shifting desert sands is basically useless.
So they essentially had to anchor a continent-spanning net into the bedrock.
They did. And the history of its construction reveals a lot about that hypercompensation. Originally in the 1860s and 70s, individual farmers were just building localized fences to stop native marsupials from migrating onto arable land.
Just normal farming stuff.
Right. But by 1884, the sheer volume of invasive rabbits forced this massive escalation. And then very quickly, the primary objective shifted to creating an impenetrable barrier against the apex predator, the dingo, specifically to protect the highly lucrative sheep farming regions in the southeast and Queensland.
The scale of the maintenance alone must be a nightmare. I read that by 1930, Queensland alone had over 32,000 kilometers of dog netting stacked on top of the original rabbit fences.
It's a constant battle against the environment.
And it's not just the fences trying to contain the land. It's the farms themselves. Let's look at the Anna Creek Station in South Australia. The source calls it a cattle ranch. But reading the operational logistics, you cannot even call it a ranch.
The terminology definitely breaks down at that scale.
It spans 30,000 square kilometers. That is physically larger than the entire country of Israel.
Yeah, it's equivalent to like 23% of the landmass of England.
The largest single paddock on that farm, just one fenced-in section called the Straying Way, is 14,000 square kilometers on its own. You can't just ride a horse around that to check on your cows.
You absolutely cannot rely on 19th century methods for 21st century hyperscale. Managing Anna Creek requires fleets of light aircraft, helicopters, and highly coordinated satellite tracking just to locate the herds.
It's insane.
It ceases to be traditional animal husbandry. It transforms into this complex aerospace and logistical operation. The farmers have to calculate water table depletion and vegetation regeneration across a landmass so large it spans different microclimates.
I have to challenge that terminology, though.
What do you mean?
This doesn't sound like farming. But I wouldn't just call it infrastructure either. This sounds like aggressive terraforming.
Terraforming is actually an incredibly apt word for it.
Right. It feels like they are playing a city builder video game on the largest map possible just to prove they can. Because when you look at something like the Nullarbor links...
Well, the golf course.
Yeah, the agricultural excuse falls apart completely. This is a golf course. A recreational standard 18-hole golf course, but it is 1,300 kilometers long.
It's absurd.
The holes are spread out across highway petrol stations, motels, and roadhouses along the air highway. You drive hundreds of kilometers through a barren desert just to get to the next tee.
And it runs parallel to a perfectly straight railway line that stretches for 478 kilometers without a single curve.
So they're just imposing these massive straight lines on nature.
Yes, and in a socio-political sense rather than just an ecological one, even their political boundaries reflect this desire to impose massive geometry on the land. Consider the federal electorate of Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. It covers 2.6 million square kilometers.
What? That is one political district larger than all of Western Europe. How does one politician even campaign across Western Europe?
With a very large travel budget and a lot of time in the air, basically.
Yeah.
But the underlying psychology is what the source material really highlights here.
Which is?
When a civilization is confronted with a landscape that is flat, arid, and seemingly infinite, the human psychological response is to impose rigid, massive geometry upon it to stave off existential threats.
Makes total sense.
The straightest railway, the longest fence, the largest ranch, it's an assertion of control. The Dingo Fence was so structurally effective, it literally created two parallel evolutionary and ecological spaces on the continent. They partitioned nature. On one side, the kangaroo populations exploded because their apex predator was removed. On the other side, the dingo remained dominant. They engineered a continental divide.
That is wild. The idea that a fence built for sheep altered the evolutionary trajectory of native species. But, it makes perfect sense when you look at the psychological profile we are building.
It's all connected.
When you feel small or overwhelmed or isolated by your circumstances, the natural human urge is to build something massive. You create rigid structures to assert control over the chaos. The Australians did that with their geography. But eventually, you hit the ocean. There's no more space to conquer.
And once the external environment is geographically conquered, or at least fenced in and gridded out, that psychological drive doesn't simply dissipate.
It has to go somewhere.
Exactly. It requires a new outlet. It turns inward.
And that brings us to the bodies. The extreme landscape bred this cultural archetype of the battler. The sources describe it as the stoic, gritty resilience of someone who just endures hardship without complaint.
It is a profound internalization of the hostile environment.
And what we see in the Guinness records is that Australians now apply that exact same terraforming mentality to their own physiology.
They become the harsh landscape, essentially testing their own biological limits to see where the machine breaks.
And the story of Daniel Scali is the ultimate embodiment of this. In August 2021, Daniel set the Guinness World Record for the longest abdominal plank. His final time was 9 hours, 30 minutes, and 1 second.
It's almost incomprehensible.
He beat the previous record, which was held by a former U.S. Marine, by the way, by over an hour. Standing in a plank for 9.5 hours is already borderline superhuman. Your core muscles would be screaming. But the twist in the source material is what makes it unbelievable.
The underlying pathology adds an entirely different dimension to the biomechanics of his record attempt.
Right. Since he was 12 years old, after falling off a trampoline and breaking his arm, Daniel has suffered from CRPS complex regional pain syndrome,
Which is an incredibly severe condition.
For anyone unfamiliar, this is an incurable neurological condition. I really struggle to even conceptualize this, but the sources say his brain sends severely amplified pain signals to his left arm constantly. A light touch, a drop of water, even just the wind blowing across his skin makes his arm feel like it is literally on fire.
Yeah.
And he chose an endurance record that requires putting constant, massive body weight pressure on that exact arm for 9.5 hours.
To understand the magnitude of that, we really have to look at how CRPS functions on a neurological level. It's a malfunction of the central and sympathetic nervous systems.
Okay, so it's not just regular pain.
No, normally a pain signal warns you of tissue damage. With CRPS, the nerve fibers misfire, creating a feedback loop of agony without any new injury.
Wow.
The reports detail his experience during the record attempt. He wore a compression bandage on his left arm, but the sheer mechanical pressure of his body weight on his elbow and forearm triggered immediate excruciating symptoms.
I can't even imagine.
He described it as a full-body experience of pain. His feet went completely numb, his thighs and knees were burning from the muscle strain, and his left arm felt like it was engulfed in flames.
So how does a human brain not just short-circuit and force the body to collapse? If your brain believes your arm is in a fire, your biological imperative is to move.
It requires immense compartmentalization.
He used physical fitness, obviously, doing thousands of push-ups and sit-ups to prepare his core. But the source notes he also hired a mind coach. He essentially trained his brain to compartmentalize the torture.
And his motivation was highly specific.
Completely altruistic. He did it to raise money and awareness for Pain Australia, an organization supporting the 1 in 5 Australians living with chronic pain. He wanted to prove that pain can be fuel, not a boundary.
And what's fascinating here is that the transformation of physical pain into a mechanism of control is a recurring theme. We see this repeated across their athletic records. It's a total rejection of physical limitations.
Who else stands out in the reports?
Take Eva Clark, for example. She's a former military fitness instructor and a Brazilian jiu-jitsu black belt. She set the record for doing 12,003 burpees in 24 hours at the Dubai Autodrome to raise money for World Child Cancer.
Wait, I need to stop you there. 12,000 burpees. In a day.
In 24 hours.
The biomechanics of that are horrifying. A burpee requires a squat, a plank, a push-up, and an explosive jump. Doing that 12,000 times, the lactic acid buildup alone should paralyze the muscles.
Under normal circumstances, yes. The primary physiological risk at that volume is rhabdomyolysis, where the extreme exertion causes skeletal muscle tissue to rapidly break down, releasing a protein called myoglobin into the bloodstream, which can cause acute kidney failure.
Oh my God.
To perform 12,003 burpees in 24 hours means she averaged roughly 8.3 burpees every single minute, without sleep, constantly fighting off muscle necrosis and total central nervous system fatigue.
It's just staggering. And it's not just the young peak condition athletes pushing back against time and biology. The sources highlight Irene O'Shea from Adelaide. At 102 years and 193 days old, she became the oldest skydiver in the world.
That's incredible.
She actually started jumping out of planes on her 100th birthday to raise money for motor neurone disease research after her daughter passed away from it.
Putting a 102-year-old body through the G-forces of free fall and the sudden deceleration of parachute deployment is a massive risk to bone density and cardiovascular stability.
I mean, the impact alone.
Exactly. It represents a total reconceptualization of human vulnerability. Age, chronic neurological pain, extreme physical exhaustion. These are no longer accepted as rigid biological limitations. They are treated as raw materials to be mentally manipulated.
So are these athletes trying to conquer their bodies the same way the farmers tried to conquer the outback? Is it that same terraforming instinct just mapped onto flesh and bone instead of dirt and fences?
The psychological parallels are undeniable, yes. However, the biological adaptation isn't merely about brute endurance or pain tolerance. It also manifests in hyper-accelerated neurological speed.
Speed? How so?
Well, the harsh frontier environment historically demanded rapid reflexes for survival, and now those reflexes are channeled into highly specialized, performative micromotor skills.
Oh, like Felix Zemdux. This kid from Melbourne is an absolute legend in the speed cubing world. He's won the World Cube Association Championship twice. Over his career, he has set 121 world records.
It's a phenomenal level of cognitive processing.
In 2018, he solved a classic 3x3 Rubik's Cube in 4.22 seconds.
He also solved it in 6.88 seconds using only one hand.
With one hand, that's ridiculous.
To understand the cognitive load of speed cubing at that level, you have to realize he is not consciously thinking about the colors. It requires instantaneous spatial pattern recognition.
It's just reflex.
As he looks at the scrambled cube, his brain selects from hundreds of memorized algorithms, which are then executed through fine motor movements called finger tricks. He manipulates the planes of the cube in fractions of a second.
So the brain completely bypasses the conscious thought process.
Yes. It is algorithmic thinking pushed to the absolute edge of human cognitive processing. The gap between seeing the pattern and the fingers moving is almost non-existent.
And then you have Nathan Whippy Griggs up in the Northern Territory. He took the most utilitarian, dusty farm skill imaginable, cracking a cattle whip, and turned it into this kinetic symphony.
The physics of what he does are genuinely fascinating.
He can crack a whip 697 times in a single minute using 2 whips simultaneously. And he even broke the sound barrier managing a whip that was over 100 meters long, a 100-meter leather cord, and he can control the wave of energy all the way to the tip to create a sonic boom.
Right, because a whip crack is literally a miniature sonic boom. The loop traveling down the whip gains speed as the taper of the leather narrows. By the time that wave reaches the tip, or the cracker, it is traveling faster than the speed of sound, roughly 343 meters per second.
Which is wild to think about.
And to control the thermodynamics and kinetic energy of a 100-meter-long whip requires an extraordinary amount of core strength and rotational torque from the human body.
And we see that same neurocognitive coordination in Anthony Kelly. The sources list him as a martial artist with 60 Guinness World Records, the most of any Australian.
His reflexes are highly documented.
He learned to catch flying arrows barehanded. In 2001, he caught 10 arrows in 2 minutes from 13 meters away. He catches paintballs blindfolded. And the most insane one to me, he caught 10 spears fired from a spear gun underwater in 1 minute.
Underwater spear catching involves intense, complex physics.
The hydrodynamics of that, water refracts light. The spear isn't even exactly where your eyes tell you it is.
You are correct. The refractive index of water distorts depth perception and speed. Furthermore, water resistance drastically slows down the human arm's reaction time compared to moving through air.
So he's fighting his own body's drag.
He has to calculate the trajectory of the spear, adjust for visual refraction, and overcome the drag of the wire, all within milliseconds.
It's like they are engineering their own nervous systems. But going through this report, a really weird paradox emerges.
What did you notice?
You have this incredible stoicism, this Spartan dedication to pain, focus, and survival. But when you mix that grit with a highly stable, wealthy economy, things get strange.
Yes, the economic context is key here.
The sources note that Australia has had this unprecedented run of economic stability. They went without a recession for over 100 quarters starting in 1991. So what happens when a population of hardwired battlers suddenly has an excess of time, money, and safety?
The energy mutates. It transitions from survivalist endurance into radical physiological absurdity and obsessive-compulsive systematization.
Because they don't have a harsh frontier to battle daily anymore.
Exactly. Without that daily survival pressure, the Larrikin spirit seeks out new, increasingly eccentric frontiers to conquer.
Which brings us to Lucky Diamond Rich, born Gregory Paul McLaren. Since 2006, he has held the Guinness record as the most tattooed person on Earth. We are talking 100% total body coverage.
And the term total coverage is not an exaggeration in his case.
No.
The documentation verifies tattoos on the inside of his eyelids, his gums, his ear canals, the delicate skin between his toes, and his foreskin.
He spent over 1,000 hours in the chair, and he didn't just get colored tattoos. The report says when he ran out of skin space, he covered his entire body in dense black ink, and then started layering white ink over the black, and then colored ink over the white.
The pain tolerance required for that technique is immense.
Getting white ink to show up vividly over solid black requires going brutally deep with the needle repeatedly. But beyond the visual shock, his backstory provides incredible context.
His personal history is very moving.
He used the circus swallowing swords, juggling chainsaws on a 3-meter unicycle to escape a criminal future. But the stress led him into severe cocaine and crystal meth addiction. By 2017, he was homeless, sleeping in a storage unit, dealing with meth-induced psychosis.
And his recovery is a testament to the resilience we've been discussing. He overcame the addiction and now works as a social worker at the Glamble Men's Alcohol and Drug Recovery Center in Victoria.
He's actually helping people.
He uses his own indigenous Aboriginal heritage, he is connected to the Quandamooka people, to help other men recover from addiction.
That's amazing.
His radically modified body, which might seem purely eccentric or intimidating from the outside, serves as a powerful tool for empathy. It visually communicates to deeply traumatized people that he has been to the extremes of pain and societal alienation and survived it.
It's a beautiful redemption arc, pain transformed into a tool for healing, but let's be honest, not all the physical records carry that kind of heavy pathos.
No, many are just absurd.
Some are just purely hilariously absurd, like Neville Sharp from the Northern Territory. He holds the record for the loudest male burp, 112.4 decibels. I mean, it's just so ridiculous.
To contextualize that acoustic output, 112.4 decibels is equivalent to the sound of a pneumatic power drill or an orchestral trombone played at maximum volume directly next to your ear.
A trombone. And he didn't just wake up one morning and do this, he trained for 45 years. The report details that his older sister told him how to burp loudly when he was 6, and for the last 5 years before the record, he was intensely coached by his wife on diaphragm control.
The level of dedication is almost clinical.
They had to go to an acoustically isolated studio at the ABC Broadcasting Network with certified sound engineers just to eliminate background noise and make the reading official. And why did he do it? The source says he was feeling patriotic and wanted to steal the record away from an Englishman who had held it for 12 years.
This is the institutionalization of Larrikinism we discussed earlier, treating an utterly absurd, biologically crude task with profound scientific seriousness. The diaphragm control required to expel gastric gas at 112 decibels without vocal cord damage is actually a physiological feat. But the motivation is pure cultural defiance. It's a unique coping mechanism for boredom.
And that coping mechanism extends from the physical body into material obsession as well.
Oh, the hoarders.
The collections documented in this country are mind-bending. Let's talk about Graham Barker, a librarian from Perth. For 26 years, starting in 1984, every single morning before his shower, he meticulously harvested his own belly button fluff.
It was a very specific kind of dedication.
Over a quarter of a century, he collected 22.1 grams of it, sorted by color, which varied based on the towels and shirts he wore, and stored it in glass jars.
The psychological progression is fascinating. It began from a place of simple curiosity, a passing thought wanting to know how much lint a single human body produces. But it evolved into a monument of human compulsiveness.
It's like a biological time capsule. He decided to archive his own existence, one microscopic fiber at a time. And he's not alone in this obsessive archiving. Alexis Erstuck in Queensland collected 2,656 unique miniature Shopkins toys.
Right.
Liesl Beneke in Western Australia got into the 2026 Guinness Book with 1,035 unique, officially certified Minions items, which apparently includes a tiny piano that plays in the fictional Minion language. And Samira Pai Patel from Perth collected 51,504 5-cent coins, all minted in the exact same year, 2006. Why Perth? It comes up constantly in these records.
Well, Perth's geography plays a massive role in this psychological behavior. Perth is one of the most geographically isolated major cities on the planet.
Right, it's way out on the west coast.
It is closer to Jakarta, Indonesia, than it is to the Australian capital, Canberra. When you are situated in a highly developed, wealthy city that is entirely surrounded by thousands of kilometers of empty desert on one side and the Indian Ocean on the other, the cultural isolation is profound.
I never thought about it like that.
Collecting and systematizing the mundane, whether it's lint or coins, is a way of creating micro-universes where you have absolute control and order.
That makes so much sense. The sources list records there for the most hula hoops, spun simultaneously 409 by a team called Happy Healthy Hoops, a circus performer juggling 5 balls while hanging entirely upside down, and a woman named Larissa Guttery, who performed 262 bikini waxes in 4 hours at an expo.
The logistics of that last one are intense.
I don't even want to think about the logistics of that last one. But what I love about this is that it's not always a solitary pursuit in a glass jar.
Yeah.
When you take this dedication to the absurd, this Larrikinism, and you scale it up to the community level, you get mass escapism.
Yes, the French sociologist Émile Durkheim coined a term that perfectly applies here. Collective effervescence.
Collective effervescence, I like that.
It describes the intense energy and social harmony created when a community comes together to participate in a shared, synchronized ritual. In the Australian context, these events bond isolated communities together through sanctioned, heavily organized absurdity.
Sanctioned absurdity is a great phrase for this. Picture the tiny agricultural town of Cowaramup in the Margaret River wine region. The locals affectionately call it Cowtown.
Naturally.
To boost local business, a local woman named Janine Darnell organized a Guinness record attempt. They got 1,352 people, which is the vast majority of the town's population, to dress up in full cow costumes. The local retailers sold the onesies to make sure they met Guinness's strict dress code standards for what qualifies as a cow.
From a sociological standpoint, it is highly effective community building. The shared vulnerability of dressing in ridiculous costumes breaks down social hierarchies. It acts as long-term global marketing for the town while internally reinforcing local identity.
And we see variations of this collective effervescence everywhere.
We do.
On Bondi Beach, 320 people dressed as Santa Claus set the record for the largest surfing lesson to raise funds for mental health. At the University of New South Wales, over 900 people gathered in white lab coats and goggles for the largest gathering of people dressed as scientists.
And the Harry Potter record.
Oh yeah, a primary school in West Byford gathered 997 students dressed strictly as Harry Potter, and Guinness validated it because wands, glasses, Hogwarts uniforms, and drawn-on lightning scars were made mandatory. It's delightful.
It really is.
But they also apply this collective maximalism to their economy and their gastronomy. Have you read the section on Johnny DeFrancesco?
The pizza chef in Melbourne. His escalating records represent a fascinating intersection of culinary science and national pride.
He heard a line in a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie that a 99 cheese pizza was a culinary impossibility. So, being a larrikin, he made one, but then a German restaurant beat him by making a pizza with 111 cheeses.
And the Australian response to being bested by another nation is inevitably an overwhelming engineered escalation.
So Johnny comes back in 2018 and creates a pizza with 154 different varieties of cheese. Gorgonzola, pecorino, taleggio, aged cheddar, Gouda, you name it. But melting 154 cheeses together isn't just throwing it in an oven. The source notes he had to literally engineer it so it wouldn't just turn into a pool of separated grease.
Because the food chemistry involved is complex. Different cheeses have different moisture contents, fat-to-protein ratios, and melting points.
It's not just a big pile of cheese.
If you just mix them, the fat's separate from the casein proteins, resulting in an oily, unpalatable mess.
So to solve that, he took exactly 1 gram of all 154 cheeses, melted them together using precise temperature control, and cooled them into a massive, unified block of super cheese. The press called it the Cheese Megazord.
A very fitting name.
Then they grated the Megazord onto the pizzas. They sold 797 of them in 5 days before they ran out.
It is culinary alchemy driven by a desire for global supremacy. We see this same maximalism in their agriculture with the Jala avocado in Queensland.
Oh, the mutant avocado.
Yes, it is a genetic mutant that weighs 1.2 kilograms, 3 times the size of a standard Hass avocado, and has the bizarre botanical property of not oxidizing, meaning it doesn't turn brown for a week after being cut.
And if you want to talk about raw wealth and maximalism, let's look at the Perth Mint. They looked at a 100-kilogram gold coin made by Canada and essentially said, "Hold my beer." In 2012, they cast a coin out of 99.99% pure banking gold that weighs exactly 1 ton.
1,012 kilograms.
It's 80 centimeters across and 13 centimeters thick. It has a legal tender value of $1 million, but the actual market value of the raw gold is over $50 million.
The metallurgy involved in that is staggering. Overcoming the challenges of melting, casting, and cooling a single ton of pure gold without it fracturing or developing internal fissures due to uneven thermal expansion is an astonishing feat of industrial engineering.
It's not just a big pour.
No, it requires custom-built graphite molds and highly controlled cooling environments.
But speaking of engineering and, well, destruction, we have to talk about the petrol heads. The car culture out there is intense, specifically the Summer Nats Festival in Canberra. In 2015, they set the record for the largest simultaneous car burnout.
For those unfamiliar with automotive subcultures, a burnout is the intentional, aggressive spinning of a vehicle's drive wheels while keeping the car physically stationary.
Right.
The goal is to generate immense friction, superheating the synthetic rubber of the tires until they combust and produce massive plumes of smoke.
And they put 103 V8 muscle cars into a specially built concrete pad, and they all just floored it simultaneously for 30 seconds. The source notes that the acoustic noise was so loud, it put physical pressure on the chests of the spectators standing miles away.
The wall of sound and energy.
And it created this massive, toxic pink, white, and blue cloud that entirely swallowed the cars.
And this represents a pivotal moment in the sociology of these records. In 2019, the organizers attempted to pack even more cars into the arena. But shortly after, Guinness World Records intervened.
They actually stepped in.
From their headquarters in London, they officially banned the burnout category entirely. They refused to monitor it anymore, citing severe environmental concerns regarding the massive release of greenhouse gases, particulate matter, and highly toxic, volatile organic compounds into the atmosphere.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me. If Guinness, this organization that happily registers belly button fluff and underwater spear catching, is stepping in to say, this is too toxic, where is the actual line? Where does a fun cultural extreme cross over into a dangerous public hazard?
That is the most crucial question we can ask, and it transitions us into the most sobering aspect of this data.
Yeah.
Because when you take that culture of anti-authoritarian limit-pushing at Larrikinism, the stoicism, the desire to go bigger and harder, and it collides with hard physiological limits and public safety, the result is no longer a quirky world record.
It becomes a horrifying anti-record. The source material pivots incredibly hard here into toxicology, specifically regarding drink driving, to set the baseline for everyone. In Australia, the legal blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, limit is 0.05% for a fully licensed driver. If you have a learner's permit or a provisional license, it's 0.00%.
To understand the medical severity of what we are about to discuss, we must establish the physiological baselines of alcohol toxicity. A BAC of 0.05% means there is 0.05 grams of alcohol for every 100 milliliters of blood.
Okay, so that's the legal limit.
Medically speaking, when a human being reaches a BAC of 0.30%, they typically enter a comatose state. The central nervous system is profoundly depressed. At 0.40% and above, it is traditionally considered lethal.
Lethal, like you die.
Yes. The respiratory centers in the brainstem simply shut down, you stop breathing, and you die.
I am struggling to process this next part then. If 0.40% is lethal, the numbers recorded by the Australian police don't even seem real. They have recorded people not just surviving far above that, but actively trying to operate motor vehicles.
It defies standard biology.
A 21-year-old woman in Canberra, on a provisional P-plate license, meaning her limit was absolute zero, was found asleep in her car. Her tires were completely flat. She had been drinking heavily the night before, woke up at 7:15 a.m., drank a few more glasses of wine, and tried to drive. Her BAC was 0.385%.
Wow.
The police had to physically shake her to wake her up.
And statistically, within the context of these anti-records, 0.385% is actually on the lower end.
That's terrifying. In Coffs Harbour, New South Wales, a 52-year-old woman drove for 2 kilometers on a busy highway before she crashed into a fence and passed out. The hospital had to put her in an induced coma to stabilize her. Her blood test came back at 0.486%.
Which is well past the lethal limit.
And the absolute highest recorded number in the country was a 55-year-old man in Ballarat, Victoria, who crashed his car into a residential house. His BAC was 0.533%. That is more than 10 times the legal limit and significantly past the traditional threshold of death.
When you look at these numbers through a medical lens, you are observing a profound and terrifying neuroadaptation. Professor Jake Nodgeman, the director of the Queensland Alcohol and Drug Research and Education Centre, commented specifically on the 0.486% case. He stated unequivocally that biologically she should be dead.
The police inspector called it a miracle she only hit a fence. So how is the body even functioning? How is the heart still beating at 0.533%?
It is the biological reality of terminal stage addiction. When the human body is subjected to chronic, massive doses of ethanol over a period of years or decades, the biology alters itself to prevent immediate death.
It just adapts to the poison.
Yes. The enzymatic systems in the liver, specifically an enzyme called cytochrome P452E1, undergo extreme hypertrophy. They multiply rapidly and work at unnatural, accelerated speeds to process the poison. Simultaneously, the GABA and glutamate receptors in the central nervous system physically downregulate.
So they become less sensitive.
They adapt to the constant, overwhelming presence of a depressant. Their lethal threshold shifts upward, allowing the heart and lungs to continue functioning in an environment that would kill a normal person instantly.
The sources also point out a really strange demographic anomaly here that I don't fully understand. A disproportionate number of these highest BAC records, the people surviving these lethal doses, are women. My initial guess was that maybe it has to do with body weight.
It is actually a misconception that it is purely about weight. It fundamentally comes down to the physiology of metabolism and body composition.
How so?
Even if a man and a woman of the exact same weight consume the exact same volume of alcohol, the woman's BAC will generally spike much faster and higher.
Yeah.
Biologically, the female body has a lower percentage of water and a higher proportion of fatty tissue compared to a male body.
Okay, I'm following.
Alcohol is highly water-soluble, but it does not absorb into fat tissue.
Right.
Therefore, the alcohol has a smaller volume of distribution in a woman's body, meaning it remains highly concentrated in the bloodstream.
Wow, okay. So it's the water-to-fat ratio that concentrates the poison. We have people whose bodies have essentially mutated on a cellular level to survive being poisoned to death, and they are getting behind the wheel of a 2-ton machine. What does the law even do with that?
It highlights a severe limitation in modern jurisprudence. Legal mechanisms are designed to manage standard deviations of human behavior.
Right, rules for average people making average mistakes.
In New South Wales, high-range drink driving starts at 0.15%.
Okay.
The penalties are designed to be severe deterrents: an automatic 3-year license suspension, a $3,300 fine, and up to 18 months in prison for a first offense.
But if someone is blowing a 0.533%, threatening them with a fine doesn't mean anything, right? They aren't making a conscious choice to break a rule.
The synthesis of these anti-records proves that standard legal deterrents fail completely at this extremity. A license suspension or a financial penalty relies on the premise of a rational citizen weighing consequences and making a poor choice.
And they aren't rational at that point.
These individuals are not making choices at all. They are in the grip of a physiological compulsion. They are surviving lethal poisoning through pathological adaptation. The legal system is attempting to use traffic laws to solve an end-stage biochemical catastrophe. It is entirely mismatched.
So what does this all mean? When we zoom out and look at this entire stack of sources, the fences, the planks, the burps, the cars, the alcohol, Australia's record-breaking really isn't just trivia.
It's much more than that.
It's this massive, glaring paradox of human nature. You have the ultimate narrative of human resilience, like Daniel Scali turning his agonizing nerve pain into a 9-hour plank. You have this beautiful, hilarious community bonding, like 1,000 people dressing up like cows just to put their tiny town on the map.
Right.
But then you also have this terrifying self-destructive edge where the exact same limit-pushing impulse creates these toxicological anti-records, and it's all playing out on the edge of the habitable world.
If we connect all these data points, it validates a fundamental truth about human sociology. Humanity will always expand to fill the container it has put in.
I love that analogy.
If the container is a small, safe, manicured garden, human behavior is constrained and polite. But if the container is a massive, empty, extraordinarily harsh continent, human behavior will stretch to massive, harsh, and often absurd extremes. They built the longest fences, endured the longest planks, and pushed their bodies to the very edges of biology simply because the environment demanded a response of equal magnitude.
It makes you wonder what happens when we change the container again. If the harsh environment of Australia bred this level of extreme physiological and psychological adaptation, what happens when humanity eventually tries to terraform Mars?
That's a fascinating thought.
We won't just be building new domes and rovers. We will likely be engineering a completely new psychological archetype of humanity, one that makes catching spears underwater look entirely normal. Until then, think about the metaphorical fences in your own life. Are they there to protect you, or are they just a challenge waiting to be jumped? And more importantly, are you building something that pushes you forward, or are you just spinning your tires in the smoke? Take care and keep diving deep.